evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We do indeed have a special guest joining me a little bit later on. It won't be too long, but that is our Deputy Leader, Phil Holden. We've got a few things we're going to talk about with you, but again, we welcome your comments. As usual, do fire them in. That'll keep the conversation going through the evening. I've got a list of topics. As usual, I'll try and cover the ones that were in the title. So we do what it says on the tin. But plenty of things to talk about this week, as ever. And if you've got some things you want to bring up in the comments, do that as well. I'll mention this at other points during the evening as well. But it's a reminder of our annual conference, which is on the 12th of November. Look on our social media. You can find the link to book your tickets for that, 12th of November in Dunfermline. We've got the lineup of speakers more or less fixed now, I think. We just need to get them in the right order. Fascinating range of speakers, as usual. I just mentioned one of them. If any of you came to our first ever Scottish Family Party Conference in 2019, you'll remember Paul Gilfillan came. Paul is a sociologist at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, and his talk was excellent. So many people have been saying since, so you're going to get him back, you're going to get him back. Well, he's been in Hungary for a little while. We've had the lockdown as well, but he's back. So Paul Gilfillan is joining us to share some of his expertise on matters related to our policies. So that's certainly something to look forward to. I think part of what he's going to talk about is what he's been involved in Hungary in terms of them. And here, the academic world is basically the opposite end of the spectrum from the family party in virtually every possible regard. In Hungary, it's a very different picture. There's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of academic attention on the sort of values that we would hold. So he's going to be talking a little bit about that. So we can look forward to that. Right, the first little story I thought I would share is one you've probably seen from the SNP conference, that they voted to raise the school starting age to 6. So moving it forward a year, or is it even 2 years? I'm not sure anyway. They're moving it up in any case. So children start school later. The thinking being that they're not really ready at the current school starting age to be sitting at a desk, learning things, doing tests, etc. They should be it should be more play-based, the curriculum. Now, I'm quite open-minded about this. I mean, if someone could show that actually starting to learn to read and do a bit of math, starting that at age 5, it doesn't actually make any difference in the longer term, you may as well wait until they're 6. I would be quite prepared to accept that. But I'm very suspicious of any research that shows that, because it comes from an educational establishment that that's what they want, don't you? I mean, the Scottish government, probably a lot of them, they would rather they never sat down at desks and learned maths and English at any stage, let alone at the beginning. They just don't think that's what education is about. Education should be about, group work and discussing the latest social issues and things. It shouldn't be about sitting down and learning maths and English at any stage. So it's inevitable that the current academic establishment is always going to say formal education should go later. They will always be saying that. I mean, you know that before you start any research. So I'm open-minded, but I'm also suspicious of the research. But my other thought about this is, what's it actually going to change? Because if you've got a class that's currently called P1, so instead of it being called P1, you call it Nursery 3 instead. What difference does it make? Well, can you not just change the curriculum for what they do in P1? Because as far as I remember with my sons, when they were in P1, there wasn't a lot of work went on, especially for the first half of the year. I mean, they were doing all sorts of things, but there wasn't much in the way of academic work, I would say. So could they not just change the curriculum for that first year? So if they're saying they're sort of abolishing P1 and making nursery carry on for another year, what does that mean? I mean, are they going to demolish all the P1 classrooms and extend the nurseries? No, it's probably going to be the same pupils in the same room with the same teacher, just it'll be called something else. That's what I would imagine is going to happen. They've already bragged that they were spending £1 billion expanding nurseries so they could do morning and afternoon rather than just morning. So they've had a massive expansion of the nurseries. Are they going to expand them even more? So my prediction is it'll be the same teacher in the same classroom with the same pupils, but it'll be called something else. And what they actually do during the year won't actually be that much different, because they don't do a huge amount of academic work in any case, I would say, in P1. So I think it might be a bit of a red herring. But one way it will be significant is at the moment you sign on at nursery, obviously you go through the nursery, and then you have to apply for the place at the school. If you're within the catchment area, that's probably going to be straightforward. If it's not in your catchment area, then there might need to be some move of school. So that point is going to be moved back a year. Is that going to be a good thing? I would suggest not. I would suggest most parents, most pupils will probably benefit from getting settled into the school they're actually going to be in for the long term at the earlier stage, rather than letting them build up their friendships more strongly in the nursery and then possibly having to change school in order to sign on at school. So I guess that might be the most significant change out of this whole thing, and that would be a negative change. But if I'd have been asked to bet, is this going to pass at the SNP conference, I'd have bet the house on it. Of course it's going to pass, because it's something about reducing the amount of academic work or pushing back proper academic work. People have been saying as well, pupils at that age shouldn't be doing tests. I mean, the tests they do, they try and make it sound, they're sat in an exam hall for 3 hours, invigilated while they have to do this big, long exam. I mean, the tests are of a type that's entirely suitable for children at those ages. And they really are very, very basic, short, and stress-free, I would suggest. But again, the SNP mindset is always going to be the children are so vulnerable and delicate. We can't expect too much from them. Giving them tests, they'll be scarred for life, having to go through that trauma of sitting at the computer and like pressing the button for which one's an apple and which one's a dog or whatever. And they can't possibly do that. So I say open-minded, but skeptical. And I'm not sure in the long term this is going to prove to be a good idea. Let's see. Right, good evening. If a child has a stable family, they'll always learn more at home than at school, certainly for P1 to P7. I've got a lot of time for that view. If the family is spending time with the child and making the efforts to teach them, then I think home education can be extremely valuable, extremely valuable. The Unite for Education conference on Saturday, we heard from people home educating Christian schools, etc. I mean, I do have some time as well for people who say they just don't think hoarding or herding children together in huge groups in a school is best for them. It's not being around adults what brings out the best in children and teenagers. It very often is, isn't it? I mean, when does your child achieve most? When are they most responsible and mature and they learn things? Is it not when they're with dad helping him out with something, or with mum getting on with something? It often is. Or if they're with a bunch of adults doing something and they're given a job to do, does that bring the best out of them? Whereas being in school with a bunch of other kids, that sometimes bring out the worst in them. Yeah, I'm not an anti-school campaigner by a long, long way, but I can see some merit in the arguments that say maybe herding children together in huge numbers for the majority of the working week possibly isn't the best move. But anyway, that's that issue. Right, something else I saw this week that was interesting. Drugs. I've been talking about drugs from time to time, just monitoring what's going on. Scotland, has got this absolutely appalling drug death record. And the philosophy towards it of the Scottish government is, I think, is wrong every time I come across something. Right, the next thing I've come across is the drug Naxalone. Now, as far as I understand it, Naxalone is like an antidote to some other drugs. So if someone's taken an overdose of some other illegal drugs, then a dose of Naxalone can save their life. Okay, and I think it's taken as a nasal spray. So, for example, I think the police have it with them. So if they come across someone that they think has taken a drug overdose, they can give them a dose of this and it can save their life. Now, for the police to have it, that seems quite sensible. But what was happening, I think maybe it was in Dundee. Can't remember what it was, somewhere in Scotland. A scheme has been introduced whereby drug addicts can go along to a training session and learn how to use Naxalone and be given some of it. And what's more, they get paid for going to this training session. Okay, so if you're not a drug addict, you can forget it. There's no money for you in it. But if you're a drug addict, if you are breaking the law and taking illegal drugs, then there is this opportunity to get paid by coming along and learning how to use naloxone. Did I say it wrong last time? Anyway, naloxone. Is that right? Can that possibly be right? So let's say you're a drug addict. You've now got your naloxone. Then what does that make you think? Does it make you think, well, sure, I feel a bit more confident taking my drugs now. I used to really worry that if I overdid it, well, that could be really bad for me. But now I've got my naloxone. Well, I'm not so worried about that anymore. So, hey, let's go ahead. And maybe someone else is thinking, oh, I'm not going to take drugs. Pretty scary things. You never know what might happen with those. But no, don't worry. I've got my naloxone. You'll be fine. If you take too much, if you go unconscious, I'll just give you a squirt of this. You'll be okay. Oh, all right, okay. I'll give it a try then. But does that thought even enter into the head of the drug policymakers in Scotland? I just don't think it does. I don't think it does. They've got a one-track mind. Their one track is, right, the people who are taking illegal drugs, what's going to help them in the short term? What's going to protect them and help them in the short term? Which is a very valid perspective. Okay, I'm not disagreeing with that perspective. That's a very valid perspective, but it's not the only perspective. There are other considerations as well that are very important and need to be considered. And I think in Scotland, they're just not. They're just not. It's the harm reduction approach. You give up completely on the idea of influencing people's behavior. You assume people are going to take illegal drugs. Nothing the government does is going to change that. So you accept people are going to take it, and all of your effort goes into trying to make it so that those people who are taking them don't do quite as much harm to themselves as they might otherwise have done. So I think that's a very limited approach to it. Where are the comments tonight? I saw a few more comments in. We've only got one so far. Is it? I was just going to do that stupid thing people do when they're doing things like this and say, is it working on all channels? Have we got people on YouTube? I assume we have. But yeah, let's see some comments. Right, what other things to mention? I was up in Stirling last week and paid a visit to Stirling Castle. I've almost finished a video about the visit. I'll just tell you a little bit about it so you can keep your eye open for the video. I mean, classic case, Historic Scotland, the government agency that's supposed to be, keeping castles open or whatever. They did their sort of Black History Month, Black Lives Matter, Black Identity Politics, Black Power sort of message, and combined it with a sort of transgender, drag, smutty pole dancing sort of. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, does this happen in other countries? Is this normal, or is this just a thing in Scotland? But sadly, in Scotland, it just seems routine that where the SNP government's involved, they just seem to be like a magnet to bring in forms of degeneracy, and especially to put it before children. I mean, who goes looking around castles? A lot of people are families with children. So keep your eye open for the video about that coming very soon. Right, another little news item from this week. There was an opinion poll published by Survation about Holyrood election voting intentions. And it had the parties in the Scottish Parliament and the various percentages. Then it had a UKIP on 1%. UKIP on 1%. And it had Reform, formerly the Brexit Party, on 2%. And the Scottish Family Party nowhere to be seen. So anyone looking at that opinion poll would think, oh, Reform. Well, they're a bit more of a serious operation in Scotland. They've got a bit more support. We also got UKIP as well. Well, they've a few people supporting them. Scottish Family Party, well, they don't exist. Who are they? They're not really in this. So how do we get that result? Considering the real election last year, the Scottish Family Party got 3 times as many votes as Reform, and we got over 3 times as many votes as UKIP as well. So how is it that an opinion poll now reckons that they're on 2 and 1%? I mean, 2% for Reform, by the way, that's 10 times as many votes as they actually got last year. 1% for UKIP, that's 5 times as many votes as they got last year. So how does that happen on the opinion poll? Has our support deserted us? No. The problem is that the polling company don't give the Scottish Family Party as an option. So the people who are filling the poll in, you normally get paid for it. So, you want to get through your job pretty quickly. It gives you the choices to tick a box, or you can put other party, or you can type in another party or whatever. And who's going to bother doing that when you're flying through it? So it's a well-known fact that if you don't give people the choice on an opinion poll, people won't choose it. People will choose the choices that are there just to keep it nice and easy for themselves. So I try to phone up Salvation and say to them, why is it that you feature two parties that we got 3 times as many votes as in the Scottish election, and you don't feature us? And this poll was about Scottish election voting intentions. They're supposed to be phoning me back, and they haven't got back to me, so I will keep on them. But it's just yet another example of a way that, I don't know how, I was going to say the system, but just things in general are stacked against the Scottish Family Party. Now, when I finally get to speak to them, I suspect they'll say something like, we choose which parties to put on UK-wide or something. Or they'll say, we only put on parties that have ever had people elected in Scotland. Now, UKIP had an MEP, didn't they? So maybe they'll say we only put on parties who've ever had anyone elected. The Reform Party had an MSP for a few months when Michelle Ballantyne defected. But the Reform Party in Scotland basically doesn't exist. I know quite a few people who are in it, but I think at the moment it is inactive. It doesn't exist. They had no candidates in the council election this year. UKIP is a tiny, tiny operation compared to what it was. It is sort of limping along with barely any support. And but then the polling company decides to come along, give those as options to people, and miss off the Family Party. Yet again, it's a small part of the way the democratic system doesn't operate the way it should. But that's quite an important thing in politics, isn't it? Getting in the opinion polls. Oh, let's see the opinion polls. Who are people going to vote for? Oh, Scottish Family Party, 2%. Oh, yeah, I remember them. Yeah, I got a leaflet from them. Oh, 2%. Oh, yeah, okay. That's more than these or these. That's what should be happening if it was fair, but it's not. So I will continue to go at Salvation. Sounds like an attempt to shut you out. What are they afraid of? I wouldn't think it was deliberate. I'd imagine they're following some sort of system that's led them to doing what they're doing. But they're not making the effort to be fair. They should know that their job as pollsters is to look at the last election, look at the parties, and if they're going to give choices, they should give choices of the parties who got the most votes in the last election. I mean, that's really obvious, isn't it? That should be really obvious, but they're failing to do that. I will keep on them. I will keep on them. Pollsters giving out different. Yeah, I mean, pollsters in general. How often do you hear about pollsters who overestimate the support of more right-wing candidates in any election? Is it not always the case? It seems to me in any case. Give me counterexamples if you want to. But it seems to me whenever there's an election anywhere, the polls are always indicating that the left-wing candidate is going to do better than they actually do. That just seems to be standard around the world. I don't know why that would be. Answers on a postcard. But that's an interesting thing I've been dealing with this week. Right, it is time to bring on our special guest, Phil.
Hello. How are you doing?
A Family Party hoodie, I see.
Yeah, Family Party sweaty. There we go.
Excellent, very good. If you want to get one of those, there's a link on the website. Our other fashionable garments as well. Do get them. And show your support. Right, good to see you, Phil. We've got lots of things to discuss as usual. Do you want to kick off with something that's on your list you wanted to talk about tonight?
Oh, yeah. So, I was just paging through the conversion therapy kind of the results of their consultation, or that the kind of background to any laws that they'd want to bring out from this. And when I was reading through it, I thought, all right, it's a shame that this is online, because it's the kind of thing I'd like to go through with a highlighter pen so that I could just pick out any bits of it that were, particularly bad. But after reading it, I thought, well, I would have highlighted everything. And really, like they've gone for the most extreme thing that they could possibly go for. That there are, I think, what kind of surprised me a lot was to see how hard it's going to be on parents, particularly. I was expecting it to affect churches quite a lot. It kind of says, I'm looking at section 16 of this document here. It says that the sentence for the criminalized acts needs to be appropriate, but precise determination of the sentence will have to be done on an individual basis, considering the relevant aggravating and mitigating factors. So basically, the severity of the punishment is related to the things surrounding it, and the kind of exacerbating or aggravating factors. Two here, it's got the performance of conversion therapy practices on a child, and so that's basically saying any parent who like disagrees with their child on the subject of their gender, then they have basically committed conversion therapy.
Yeah, so it's basically saying to a child, saying to a boy, no, boys don't wear dresses. Then that's
those kind of things. So like you've got the primary school which told all the boys to go to school wearing dresses, and suppose a boy comes back and say, I want to wear a dress tomorrow as well, mum, and the mum says, no, I don't think that's good for you to wear, or one of those kind of things. So it's like anybody who tries to do anything to change somebody's gender expression, or their sexual orientation or anything like that, and then it says the performance of conversion practices on a person in a situation of vulnerability, for instance, a person with mental disorders and persons who are in a situation of dependence. So again, that might be children, or where they have a carer or something like that. And the way that they'd like to resolve this is to remove people, remove parental responsibility, or the guardian's responsibility for a child, if it's been found that they've been practicing conversion therapy, which is as simple as disagreeing with the fact that they're not the gender that they're not, basically. And so, for Christians, like I'm a Christian, Bible says God created people male and female. And it says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother, be united with his wife. And in the verse that speaks about that, you've got, what people would today say gender, which is like the roles of wife and husband. You've got what people would say is sex, which is, he created them male and female, or man and woman, so you've got those two things, which, like, as a Christian, I wouldn't divide. I wouldn't divide gender or sex or any of those kind of things. And so simply for holding that view, it would make me unfit to be a parent, basically, if my child disagreed with me on that view.
I mean, basically, the big picture is that it's just 100% bowing to the LGBT lobby. It's just whatever they've wanted. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. And I think big part of it is, again, zero MSPs opposing it. When I watched one of the committees, and Jeremy Balfour was in there. Now, I would guess, I don't know Jeremy Balfour, but I would guess from his background that he actually doesn't agree with this, and he's got pretty severe reservations. But, he sat through the committee meeting and he didn't say a thing to oppose it. He tried to say things were sort of maybe, I don't know, maybe not quite what the other people were saying, but he didn't oppose it. So the families are going to get split up. The people, again, Muslims, Christians, all sorts of other people as well, who are going to find themselves in big, big trouble for that. That was Jeremy Balfour's opportunity to speak up for them. And I don't know, sorry to be harsh here, but just got to face the truth. He didn't do it. He sat there in the parliament and he didn't say anything to oppose this. And we've got to have people in there who are going to oppose it. That's what we need the family party in the parliament for. I mean, we wouldn't be able to vote it down, but at least there would be someone really attacking this and really pointing out what it means for people, because at the moment it's like it's too hot a potato for anyone to touch. It's a bit too controversial, so let's just back off and let them have completely their own way. I mean, I've heard it described. I'd said this already before I heard other people describe it, that it's looking like we're heading for having the worst conversion therapy ban in the world, the most extreme in the world. Would you agree with that from what you've seen of it and what you've heard?
From what I've seen, like conversion therapy is basically defined as, like, I guess, non-affirmation. And so anything that you do or say that wouldn't affirm somebody's, I guess it's right to choose their gender, then that would be criminal, basically, because you're trying to encourage them not to express themselves in that way. For pastors, what was interesting was basically it's like, if you're a pastor and you're found to be involved in conversion therapy, it basically means that your church has to either sack you or lose its charitable status, you would somehow have your license removed as well as as having the ability to practice religion or teach religion.
We're talking about what would be a criminal offence. So if someone, I don't know, maybe it would be a fine or something in the first instance. If someone persisted in it, then they would find themselves in prison. Right, Jerry, that's an interesting question. So if you've got a couple with, say, two, you see these pictures of families where both parents are transgender, and dear oh dear, the poor old kids. But if those parents were to say something to their child to encourage them in a transgender direction, would that be covered by this law? It's
sort of interesting. Like I've not gone through it with a fine tooth comb, but there were things basically saying that there's sections about how survivors need to be treated, basically, and that says that survivors need to be heard by counsellors who are themselves survivors, basically, of conversion therapy. And so it's basically saying that the only people that can counsel people are those who would take the view that anybody who thinks that people should stick with their sex assigned at birth, as the language goes, that those are unfit people to offer an opinion. And basically offering your opinion is the offence at that point. Yeah. And
it's creating an industry then, isn't it? There'll become this mini industry of your qualification to get into it is you have to have some story about the way someone practiced conversion therapy on you. Once you've got your story, the money will flow, and there's your career there in it. And that's a motivation as well for people to come up with the stories as well, to join the club. To join the victims club.
And I'm guessing that since it's these counsellors that would be the expert witnesses, like in a case of conversion therapy. So if they're the ones, like obviously if conversion therapy is alleged to have happened, you're going to want some kind of counsellor's expert opinion. And if the only ones who can offer that expert opinion are those who say they've been through conversion therapy because their parents didn't affirm them, then obviously the people who believe that men are male and women are female, then they could never be an expert witness in such a case. Yeah,
I think the effect of this, and I was just talking about this earlier on to someone, the hate crime legislation and the hate speech legislation. The bill's been passed, but my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm out of date here, but my understanding is that the police have not implemented it because they've said, we don't know what to do with this. We don't know how to assess it. So it was passed, but then actually, it's not actually an operation on the ground. Now, with the conversion therapy ban, I would imagine that will be an operation straight away. And there will be horror stories. There will be families broken up. There will be, but what sort of people will end up being charged for it first? It will, first of all, be people sort of towards the fringe. It might be someone who might have phrased things in a way that we might not have thought was the best way, or they might have been a bit brash, or the people we'd watch and we'd think, oh, right, I'm not sure that was the right way to do that. They will probably be the first people to be in the firing line. And the temptation for other people then would be to say, oh, no. Now, if that was me, I would have been much wiser. I'd have done that much better than that. And I wouldn't have got into trouble like they have. It's sort of their own fault. That's the temptation. But then as time goes on, it will become broader and broader. People will be tricked by it. People will run sort of sting operations where they'll pretend and record it on their phone and then get people charged with it. But the main effect will be it will just chill people. People will be afraid to have these conversations. And a lot of people, if you look at, say, Christian leaders, they might think to themselves, oh, I'd better be especially wise. In other words, I'm actually not going to have these conversations with people anymore because that's my idea of being wise. And then they just won't have the conversations. And the law will function mainly by that effect, by just making people a little bit scared. And they won't say, oh, I'm scared, so I don't do it anymore. They'll say, oh, you have to be wise. But the effect's the same. Just these conversations won't happen. And the government's control over society will have been ratcheted up another notch.
Well, I think like the interesting thing is that there's many groups which are opposed to this, and so, it's not just Christians, but there'll be Muslims, there'll be feminist groups, so yeah, all sorts of just people who believe in science and things like that. That there'll be a fair number of groups that think this legislation is just completely wrong, and probably a lot more so on the transgenderism than on the kind of sexuality issues. But I think, if there can be a coalition of people that are just, against the parts of this bill, then yeah, that's our best hope of standing on it. And I think, like as well within the church, it will do something to separate those who, I guess, standing on their faith, and doing, Jesus, he said, like, people hate me because I say that what it does is evil. They don't hate you because you don't say that, and I think that those that value those words of Jesus, that they will stand up, and the same like for people in Islam, same as people who just think, well, the science says that, X chromosome, XX, it's female, XY, it's male, that's the way I see it. There'll hopefully be people standing up against this, from
I would say in terms of the bill, everyone will know what I'm going to say. Basically, it's too late. At the last election, every party that's got a representative in the Scottish Parliament had a conversion therapy ban in its manifesto. So 129 out of 129 MSPs have been elected on a manifesto that said they were going to implement a conversion therapy ban. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe, its wings could slightly be clipped through as it goes through the Parliament. But with the actions of 0 MSPs, I think it's pretty unlikely. Now, it may be that 1 or 2 MSPs might, come out on the trans thing, because that's not quite as toxic for them. You don't have to be quite as brave to come out on that one. Well, you don't have to be anywhere near as brave to come out as that one as you would talking about the sexuality issue. But just on that fine, I find myself sometimes using the word brave, and other people use the word brave as well. If you say what you believe, you've been really brave. Then maybe we need to recalibrate a little bit here. I mean, no one's going to get, well, not yet. No one's going to be thrown in prison for opposing this bill. I mean, no one's going to have their head chopped off about it. So maybe we use the word brave and we make it sound like that we assume that it's only really exceptional heroes who would be willing to say, actually, this is not right. But surely that should be normal. Surely we should think that a normal person says what they think. And then a hero, does something that really, they're taking massive risks with really important areas of their life. But surely just saying what you think, speaking the truth, surely we would just need to regard that as just mainstream. It's more that people who don't do that should be open to to question their conscience, rather than saying people who do it are really brave. Do you think there's anything in that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the last breath of freedom that we have legally to express what we, express what we want without consequences. And we should take that, the opportunity to protest on these things and to make a noise on it. I think more and more people who have experienced I guess what you might say as sex change or gender realignment operations are coming out and saying that this ruined my life. This was the biggest mistake I've ever made, the worst mistake it's ever made. My parents blame themselves for it. I was just a child when I made these decisions. And if there's anything I could change, I just wish I could go back. You can find testimony after testimony saying this. There's 1,000 individuals, I think, that want to join a class action kind of against the Tavistock Institute for the kind of gender surgery and things that have gone on there. And so, in this document, it's saying that the torture is those who are, asking people to think twice about this and saying, really, I think this is the wrong road for you. I think this is going to cause you problems.
Yeah.
And what I see is people who are saying my breasts have been cut off. I can't have my own family now. Those things were not important to me when I took that decision to transition. And now that's taken from me. I'm stuck with a voice that I can't change. And and
as the person who asked them to think twice is the torturer.
Yeah.
And the surgeon is the medic, is the health care provider.
The actual bodily mutilation is seen as offering a real service to somebody, and the life that somebody lives afterwards is they're forgotten about. I just listened to the testimony of one kind of person that transitioned, and they said when I transitioned, I went from being nobody to being somebody that everybody wanted to speak to, and I was the most popular person. But then within a month or two, people had moved on, and I felt so lonely, so rejected, and and then I was left with how my body was, and I just wanted to go back. And that was, and there was no way. There's no way back. That she could grow her hair a bit and things like that, but her voice is still low, and her her private parts have been mutilated. And then this bill says that the torture is talking to somebody and saying, we think this is not the right way to go.
And that's what goes on in schools. It's like declaring that you're transgender, same as you're declaring another sexuality. That is celebrated. You're the special person. You're the center of attention. And a lot of the teachers will be thinking, oh, this is my chance to be a really, really good teacher by showing how accepting and tolerant I am. So I'm going to give them special treatment. And they love that. So that the children know that if they just have to announce one of these new identities or whatever, that gets you special attention, a bit of extra warmth, care, and positivity from the staff. But as I say, then it's going to pass. It's going to be someone else's turn after then someone else's turn. Then you leave school, and the staff, I wouldn't say the staff don't care, but they don't follow up. They don't follow the consequences through the rest of life. So I think that's a very important.
And I'd say that, when I was at school, there were times that were very low for me, that there were times I'd be bullied and things like that. And I think, I just wish I was someone else or anyone else, And I think sometimes that's what transgenderism is offering somebody is essentially that chance to kind of start again and wipe the slate clean. But it comes with all these other consequences that you're like, you become a different person, but then you have to live with it.
My challenge would be to the handful of MSPs who are really thinking this is not right, and to the many church leaders, other people as well, who are thinking something like, I know this is not right, but it's really not the time to talk about it. We don't want to be too confrontational. If I do this, we've got quite a good relationship with the local MSP. It comes to the carol service. We don't want to spoil it, so we don't want to be too outspoken. All those sort of things. But so on the scales, you're putting those on one side of the scale, and that is outweighing huge numbers of young lives being absolutely wrecked, families being torn apart. Now, I think if you're weighing your reputation and your good relationship with the local MSP and being able to fit in and not be too controversial, if they weigh heavier than huge numbers of young lives wrecked, families torn apart, then I think there's something wrong. And I would invite people to reconsider. I feel a bit on the warpath tonight about this, but people really need to wake up. So I think it's not so much the people who speak out have been brave. I would say it's a lot of people are not performing their basic duty in standing up for what they believe, for the sake of others.
So maybe another thing was I attended for the first time the 40 Days for Life prayer vigil this week. So your wife Mari was organizing that, and that was an experience. Just being outside the clinic, and so many people would walk past and they'd say things like, shame on you, and things like that. That was probably the most common thing that people would say. And other people would say, I remember one person saying, haven't you got anything better to do with your life or better to do with your time? Thinking, no, no, I haven't actually, and just it's another thing where life is being taken away. We're not in the way of anybody. We're on the other side of the road. There was about 5 or 6 of us there. I was holding up a picture of a fetus, just an illustration of one, nothing gory or anything like that, just a fetus in the womb, and it says "Choose Love" on it. And people are furious about that. That they're thinking this is a terrible thing, and looking at the things which are there. Because I'm involved in politics, I like to talk with people. I'd love to argue things through with people and things like that. And when I'm asking the people organizing, am I able to talk with that person there? There were people from the Back Off campaign. They say, no, we're just here to pray. You're not to talk with people. They're really not, looking to obstruct anyone or in any way do any all the prayers which are there are just God, we're not praying for any vengeance or any of those things. We're praying for your love to be shown to the people that are doing these operations, Lord. We pray that they'll come to repentance. We pray for change in their lives, Lord God. We pray that that they'll come into a blessed place in their lives, and we pray for restoration for those that have had abortions and things like that. And so that the things which are being prayed are not hellfire, damnation kind of prayers. It's prayers of basically restoration and wanting to see life and things like that. And then you see the way it's portrayed in the media of just people being intimidated and people being harassed and these kind of things. So yeah, it was good being there. And I have to, the reason that I could come was that my work had a mental health day. So I think it was World Mental Health Day, and we were told to go and do something that was good for our mental health. And really it had been on my conscience that this was something that I strongly believed in, hadn't done anything about. And I really did feel that going out, that for me as a Christian, it was good because it says in the Bible that if people insult you for something good that you do, then you're blessed. And I really kind of felt that as people were saying, not kind things to me, was that, it's actually, there's like a cleansing thing within that. But
there's just a few stories from that. There was a story in the Edinburgh Evening News. Some lady claimed that she turned up for an appointment at the clinic. It was jeered at. A lie. It's just a lie. And she was so traumatized that she had an asthma attack. I don't think I even read the whole story. I'm sure she claimed that she was at death's door or whatever. Just pack of lies, downright lies. And that's what you're facing.
Well, I don't know. Like I think it really does touch something in somebody. Like I think Edinburgh is quite a shy city, and to see so many people actually come out of their shell to say something, was in some ways quite a surprise. 'Cause it wouldn't have surprised me in Glasgow if people, because people are more talkative there, and generally more friendly and engaging with other people. But in Edinburgh, like we're quite, I don't know, what would you say, repressed when it comes to reserved. Yeah, that's the right one. Reserved when it comes to speaking to people. But that was really, getting beyond where people were reserved to it pulling a reaction out of them. And there's one guy who was like, he was somebody who had him and his partner had an abortion, and he was saying that the reasons there were he felt it was not right to bring a child into a world that was so messed up, and you've got the cost of living crisis and all of these kind of things, and it's really terrible kind of stuff, and it's really like if you took that policy, like if Liz Truss said, cost of living crisis is a pain, and there's just going to be a bunch of people that are going to be miserable because they don't have enough. So we think the right thing to do is just kill those people that are, at the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to finances and things like that. That they're going to be miserable more than half the time. So way to solve it is just to put an end to their lives. That obviously there'd be outrage, and yet people think that's a good argument when it comes to a human life. When
you can water it down even if you said, right, if you're a bit short of money, then our recommendation is don't have children.
Yeah,
because times are hard. It would be right. It would be outrage. Another couple of things from it this week. Some of the children for the local school were pretty aggressive towards some of the people on the vigil, like throwing a sandwich, banging on the placards while people are holding at them trying to snatch placards. But then there was some contact made with the school, and then I think, was it today? I was hearing that like child after child from the school coming along saying something positive, stating their agreement and their support. What I find interesting is in the normal run of things, I'd say it's about 2 to 1. You sometimes get people who give you a thumbs up. For every thumbs up you probably get 2 like middle fingers or shame on you or whatever. But I found this year, there's one time I went and it was just like 6-0 for positive responses. And then other times, and Mary said the same as well. Sometimes they've had a session where it's just been bizarre. There's just been an absolute string of continual positive responses. But then another day, it seems to go the other way. It's as though it's beyond any sort of statistical randomness explanation. And there's something else going on. And the other story very quickly, when I was there, I was the leader of the little group. So I'm the person who spoke to people. A lady came along. So I took her to one side to talk to her. And her question was, why does God have nipples? So we spoke about that briefly. I said I wasn't sure that was the most helpful question to go. And in that conversation, I find what happens is what often happens talking with people about any topic is that they'll have, say, 3 arguments, and they'll put one forward, and you'll respond to it, and then say, basically, right, you're right, your move. I've responded to your argument. You need to come back on me now, or you need to say, oh, okay, I'll go away and think about that or whatever. But people don't do that. What they do is bring in their argument number 2, and then you reply to that and say, right, and how would you like to respond to that? And they bring in argument number 3. Then say, right. So
normally they go back to argument number 1.
Then they go back to number 1.
Yeah.
You just go round and round and round.
Yeah.
And never get there. So eventually, she kept interrupting me. Eventually, I said, I'm not sure it's very helpful if you're just going to interrupt. And she went on her way. But yeah, I mean, what you say is absolutely right. It's an absolute fantasy world created in the parliament and in the media. Now, I'm a bit, if you like, I'm very skeptical of conspiracy theories and try not to go overboard with things. But you see the way that the political system and the media can completely misrepresent something, willfully, deliberately, completely misrepresent it. And it makes you think, okay, the reason I know they're misrepresenting it is because I know more about this than they do. I know what's really going on. So I'm looking at their reports, and I'm not trying to learn anything. I'm checking they're reporting it right. And they're not. I mean, it's just completely misrepresented. But then that makes you think, what about all the things where I actually don't have the inside information, and I am relying on the media and what's said in the parliament?
Yeah, I mean,
it makes you think.
I think that's where it's important that we're a grassroots movement as the Scottish Family Party, because the media is not going to do us a lot of favours. Probably, that most media organisations, they'll say they're neutral in so many ways, and vow that's what they're doing and everything's thoroughly researched. You look through the articles, and at best there's a token, statement from one side, and 95% of it is stating all the arguments on the other side. And that's why I think it's so important for us in the Family Party to get out on the street, to start speaking to people. It's the reason, like, I bought the Family Party top a while ago. I was really encouraged by Hamish, who stood for us in the Borders. And I saw that he just went everywhere with his Family Party hoodie. He's very different to Richard, like, whereas Richard's quite challenging and everything that he says, Hamish is sort of the most polite person that you'll ever meet, and he, at the end of the election, he says, I hope you've all written to the returning officers thanking them for, the great job that they've been doing, all this kind of stuff, And so for him to, like, wear a Family Party sweatshirt is the greatest honour that there could be, Whereas for me, sometimes it's like, I wonder what the neighbours will think when I'm... they realise what's happening in the Family Party and things like that, And I really want to encourage people to be sharing stuff, with their friends and with their neighbours. Don't be ashamed of the Family Party. Don't be ashamed of what you're standing for or what we're standing for. And yeah, it's important that we get those ones and twos in, like, every school and every public forum. I was encouraged dropping my child off to school the other day. On the way back, a parent stopped me and said, "Oh, you're from the Family Party, aren't you?" And I love what they're doing. Love, Richard Lucas. Love his stuff. This person. I'm a Christian. He wasn't a Christian, but we have the same values when it comes to the family and things like that. He said, at first I wasn't on the same page with abortion, but I listened to what Mari was saying, and that made complete sense to me, and I'm in agreement with that. And it was saying, well, since our children at the same school, why don't we start trying to make a stand in that school? And let's see what we can do in parents' evenings and things like that. And I just encourage other people to be thinking about taking a stand in every, like, forum that you can. Find one or two people around you that are on a similar page. We did the film for the down by the Parliament, the sex education stuff, and we needed somebody to do the filming for that, and I pulled in a friend who'd voted for us. He's a Muslim, and he really enjoys making short films and things like that, and just said, I need another pair of hands doing this. Could you give us a help? And I said, yeah, sure. And he quite enjoyed doing what we were doing there, And that's what we need at the moment. It's just people pulling other people in, getting people on board. And, some of these things are quite enjoyable, quite fun to do. I think we had a fun time filming down by the Parliament. Yeah.
Yeah. On the subject of that video, you've probably seen it because 27,000 people have watched it. So probably everyone watching this has seen it. But if you haven't seen it, do go to YouTube and watch the video where we sort of do a slideshow about sex education on the side of the Parliament. But I've got some other ideas as well for the videos to make that are a bit more striking, a bit more novel. I don't know what the word would be, but just to try and capture people's attention with our message. Not particularly saying anything new. I often make videos saying something new, but this is maybe saying what to some of us we might feel like the same old things, but there's a lot more people we need to reach with this. But Phil, here's an interesting snippet for you about that video. I had it open on my desktop earlier on today. I looked at the number of views and I thought, I wonder if it's gone up any. I'll just give it a refresh. I gave it a refresh and the number of views went down.
That's interesting. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. By how much? Just a few or?
Couple of hundred. How could that possibly happen?
I'm not sure how that happens. Yeah. So what was quite a surprise with this video was that we got to about 25,000 in about a day or something like that. I'm not sure that was quite that, and then it suddenly hit this wall. You look at the graph and it goes up like this and then goes completely flat like that. And so we're not quite sure why that is, in terms of YouTube's algorithms or if somebody's put a ceiling on it or something like that. And so, like I say, like we're not expecting big favors from the BBC or from the newspapers or from the kind of liberal tech giants or anything like that. And so where people say, like and subscribe and things, please do those things. But actually the way that to get the message out is to email the link to people that email it to parents, email it to everyone that you think should hear about this video. And that's the way that we'll get the message out. And I think it's a good thing for us because it means that, we're not being led by like a celebrity or one person with a lot of influence. The way that we'll win in this country is by everybody doing their bit, reaching out to those that they know. And it's a great thing that when you start talking to people about these things and you realize I'm not the only one that feels this way, that there are lots of people, when you open up the subject, they're like, this is horrendous, I think that's amazing going through the comments as well. Like so many people saying, I had no idea this is what was being taught in my schools. Absolutely shocking. Others like, I joined the family party right now having watched it. Other people like, I'm gay and I watched this and I'm shocked at what's being taught in schools. This is absolutely horrendous, so people from so many perspectives saying that this is wrong, like people who the government is claiming to represent when they're pushing this stuff into schools. Those people themselves are saying this is filthy and disgusting. It shouldn't be taught to primary school children in this way.
Yeah, so hopefully the views are still going up at a reasonable rate. But you're right, it was going up very steeply, and then suddenly.
It might be the organic sharing, which is keeping it moving forward, and just people please continue to do that. Another interesting thing on the stats for that was that, like the audience for it, when we looked at it, it was mostly male. What was the age group? Average age 45, was it? It
was 45 and up with the big groups.
Yeah, and that's obviously like Richard and my kind of demographic. We were the ones who made it, and there's obviously 100 other groups within society, and so if you've got creative ideas about how to express the same messages that we're giving as a family group to maybe mums or students or young people or those kind of things, we need everyone on board, and bring all your creativity, share your ideas with us, share your talents and your skills, and that's how we'll see a change.
Yeah. I would say with the one thing I'd add to that is I suppose ideas are good, but we're pretty full stretch doing things as well. What we really value is people who can actually do something and bring it to a conclusion. That's the ultimate. If you can take something on and say, well, I'll produce something for you, not so much, can we have a cup of coffee? I've got a great idea, but more, right, I'll produce it. When do you want it by? I'll give it. See what you think of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some of these things, like for Richard and I, we're trying to work out where the line is as well. You know, we have a think about, you know, and we don't want somebody to do something which is a complete embarrassment to the family party. So if you've got something you think this is right on the edge, and sometimes it's those things which are on the edge are actually the things which really do hit home the hardest. But if you have some reservations about it and you think, should we go with this? And there are things that we discuss as a group and we say, no, we wouldn't actually do that one. But there are other things we say, yes, we'll go ahead with that. And so before you you do something incredibly public, maybe run it past us and send us an email about what you're thinking of.
Anything should be published through the family party in consultation. Yeah. Right. This is interesting. YouTube suggesting desubscribe, then resubscribe, turn on notifications. Yes. I mean, definitely. I've heard a few people say they've had issues with on Facebook, for example. There was a phase when you couldn't find the family party. If you search for Scottish Family Party, the first result that came up was the page mocking us, and then we were nowhere to be seen. So I think things come and go with that. So yeah, do resubscribe. Make sure your notifications are turned on to make sure you get videos. Now, someone just mentioning GB News there. I was going to mention GB News very quickly, just before we finish as well. People send me things from GB News sometimes. I would say as a general thing, if you see something on GB News and you're thinking, oh, Richard would be interested in that, probably what I would prefer, don't send GB News' material to me, send our material to GB News. That's probably what's going to be more valuable, because at the moment GB News is a little bit of a challenge for us, let's put it this way, because they beam into Scotland, for example, the leader of the Reform Party that doesn't exist in Scotland. They had no candidates in the election this year. We got 3 times as many votes as them last year. But a lot of our supporters and potential supporters watch GB News and they go, oh, the Reform Party, they're a big professional. I mean, they're on the telly, aren't they? They're always on the telly. They must be the serious players in politics. They've got Lawrence Fox and his Reclaim Party. Again, I'm not sure it exists in England particularly, but it certainly doesn't exist in Scotland. But again, you watch GB News and they're a big thing. He's always there. He's always on the telly. They're the proper politicians. Family Party, they're never on the telly. They must be some sort of fringe show. I mean, they get far more votes, but obviously they're not really the serious. So it's a bit of a problem for us, and it's becoming increasingly frustrating to have that. So at the moment, GB News, which we thought initially might be something that was helpful for us because it would give us something of a platform, it's actually turning out to be the opposite, because it's platforming parties that don't exist in Scotland and presenting them to our supporters and potential supporters. So if you think, oh, I saw that on GB News, I'll send that to Richard. I prefer you to do the opposite. Take something we've done and send it to GB News and say, why haven't you got these people on? Because they're far bigger than Reform and Reclaim and whoever else in Scotland. So that would be a good thing to do. I'll annoy GB News. So I don't annoy them too much, but certainly send them things along. And it would be great to get more of.
I think the volume of we try sending some things to them, but obviously they'll get a lot of material in, but maybe receiving the same thing many times from lots of people will help them to know that this is a thing that's happening.
When GB News launched, I was on it 4 times in the first month, maybe, which was great. But I think possibly that was during lockdown and everyone was online. Whereas now they're preferring to get more people in the studio. So I don't know if that's been a factor as well. I'm not sure. I think part of it as well is that Nigel Farage is very influential there. And he would like the Reform Party to be kept on the boil so that if at some point he decides he wants to make a comeback and become leader of the Reform Party and whatever issue. So I think he quite likes the idea of keeping Reform on the boil as an option for him should he want it. So, whereas, for example, the Daily Mail and the Daily Express, their mission is get the Conservatives elected. So whatever we do, they'll try and report it as though with the Conservatives front and centre. Whereas with GB News, I think maybe there's a little bit more when it comes to like smaller parties. They want to put reform front and centre rather than other ones. I mean, having said that, they had David Curtin of the Heritage Party on recently. Again, I think the Scottish Family Party is a much bigger operation than the Heritage Party, but they had David Curtin on. So, anyway, yeah. So keep at them, and let's see what happens. Right, time has flown. You are wondering why? Yeah, ask them, not us. That's great. Right, so right. Sorry for not getting to many questions tonight. I tend to comments rather. I tend to get to a lot of comments when I'm doing the live stream on my own. When I've got a guest, it's a bit more tricky to get to them. But thank you for your comments in any case. I've been reading them as they've been coming in. And yeah, thanks very much, Phil, for coming on.
That's okay.
And sharing your thoughts on these issues. And everyone else, thanks for watching, if you're watching live or watching later on. And don't forget the conference. Do sign up, get your tickets tonight for the conference and the dinner, if you'd like to come to the dinner as well. And look forward to seeing you there. Right, good night.